you don't know that you're going to succeed or fail. You don't know either one of those outcomes at all. There's no way to tell. And being afraid of failure that may or may not happen is something that's going to stop you from doing what you want to do and becoming who you want to become and achieving what you want to achieve. Hey, it's Rob. Welcome back. Here we are with chapter 20 of Brian Tracy's book, The 21 Success Secrets of Self-Made Millionaires. This has been a fabulous ride. These last couple of videos are going to be a little shorter than the previous because Brian has a little bit of repetition here towards the end and sort of presents some concepts he's already presented. So I won't go into great depth on those. But the important thing to talk about in this chapter is what a lot of people call failure. And you may know from some of my other content that I don't really like to use that word a whole lot. I will in this case because that's the word that Brian Tracy uses in this book. And I am, of course, referring to him and his book. So this chapter is called Never Consider the Possibility of Failure, which I took to heart. And that's why I don't even consider the word failure anymore. But that's a whole other topic. Now, what he points out in this chapter is that it is not failure that prevents us from winning or from reaching our goals and achieving our dreams. It's the fear of failure that stops us before we ever even get going, before we ever even start. Or maybe we start and then we stop way too soon because we are afraid of upcoming failure that we see on the horizon, which of course is nonsense because there isn't any way to predict the future. The best way to predict the future is to create it, as I've heard. And so you don't know that you're going to succeed or fail. You don't know either one of those outcomes at all. There's no way to tell. And being afraid of failure that may or may not happen is something that's going to stop you from doing what you want to do and becoming who you want to become and achieving what you want to achieve. So again, it's the fear of failure and not failure that actually prevents us from succeeding. And there's a quote in the chapter, there's several quotes in the chapter that I love. One of the main quotes in the chapter is from Thomas J. Watson, who was the founder of IBM Computers. And a journalist had asked him at some point, what do you recommend? I want to succeed faster. What do you recommend I do? And he replied, I'm going to paraphrase here, but of course the quote is in the book. But he replied, in order to succeed, you have to double your rate of failure. Success lies on the far side of failure. And nothing could ever more be true than that statement. It is through failure, or what I call a different result than I wanted, right? Failure to me, and I'll explain this briefly, it's just a result. And so the word failure has this connotation to it and this dark cloud hanging over it. And I guess negativity, really is how a lot of people think of failure. And I don't see it that way. I just see it as a result. There's nothing positive or negative about it. It's just a result. Now, if it's the result I wanted, great. People would call that success. If it's the result that I didn't want, then that's what some people will call failure. I don't. I just call it a result. And now that empowers me to go back and figure out what I can do differently and try again and get closer to success. Because success lies on the far side of achieving results you don't really want. Right? So that's how I see it. And that's, this chapter, again, I sort of took that whole advice to heart of never considering the possibility of failure. Another thing that Brian Tracy talks about in this chapter is risk-taking and how, successful people take calculated risks. Self-made millionaires take calculated risks. So what does that mean and how do we do that? What's the action step for that? And this is your action step here, is to take this approach, okay? I have a coach, JT Fox, and he has this brilliant method of determining how to evaluate a risk, okay? And so the things that you do are, you project in your mind what you think is the best possible outcome, right? Now you project in your mind what you think is the worst possible outcome. Then you consider what is the most likely possible outcome. And based on those three factors, you now make a decision. You make an informed decision about whether to take that risk or not. If you're risking your life and the worst that could happen is you die, you may want to reconsider that risk and that action, all right? If the worst that can happen is that you lose everything, then you would, I think, by this point, if you have a lot to lose, stick something away so that you have kind of a base to start over from. And in fact, when J.T. Fox made his first million, he made $1.25 million, and he took $1 million of that $1.25 million and he stuck it away so that if he lost everything, he would return as a millionaire. The millionaire point would be his zero, right? So you kind of redefine your floor. And that's a brilliant way to do it. And of course, none of us, well, I shouldn't say none of us, some of us may have $1 million laying around to be able to do that. But the point is that when you make your first $1 million, then you don't go out and spend it all and blow it on a bunch of stuff and go up your lifestyle. Remember Parkinson's law from earlier in this book. You need to kind of safeguard yourself against future risk so that then you can take those risks without having to worry about losing everything, because if you quote unquote lose everything, you're still starting as a millionaire, right? And so it's just a brilliant way to think of things, is this best case, worst case, and most likely. And so that will give you the framework that you can use to evaluate decisions and risks and decide which ones are worth taking and which ones aren't. Because in order to win big and in order to be a huge success in whatever you're doing and in order to be a self-made millionaire, you will have to take risk. You cannot be risk averse. It's just not going to work. All right. So a very key component to this chapter and a very important point. The last thing that I want to talk about is the idea of failure is not an option. And Brian Tracy spoke that line in the book, in the chapter, and it comes from the movie Apollo 13. Of course, that was where he quoted it from. That's not the first time that line had ever been said in the world. But failure is not an option, right? You need to commit to that level of effort and that level of planning and strategizing so that failure is not an option. And you also need to commit to, this leads into the final chapter of the book, which we'll get to next, but this leads into the idea of keeping going, keep on going, right? Commit to getting the result at all costs. Failure is not an option. And in another quote that's in the chapter here, which I also love, is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he said, again, I'm going to paraphrase, but the quote is in the book for you. But he paraphrased. I'm going to paraphrase that when you fear something, you need to just lean in and do it. Because when you do the things you fear, the death of fear is certain. And that's the Emerson quote. So again, that's like a signal. When you fear something, that's a sign that you need to do it. Okay? You need to go out and make it happen, because otherwise you're going to let that fear stop you and paralyze you, and you're going to develop limiting beliefs around it, and you're going to limit yourself, and you're never going to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So I want to encourage you to face your fears by doing the thing that you fear, because the death of fear is certain. So, your action step, again, adopt this framework of this best, worst, and most likely, because it really provides clarity and you can make a good decision based on the information. And you don't just haphazardly kind of throw things out there. You have to make an analysis of it. You have to take some time. But again, remember that self-made millionaires make decisions quickly, right? And then they adjust along the way. So, when you're facing a major risk, you're going to need to take a little extra time. When you're facing some lesser risk, I guess we'll call it, then you probably are best off acting fast and then adjusting. But you do need to make some sort of analysis before you start, right? So there you have it. That's chapter 20. We're going to move on to chapter 21 next and finish up this book. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Like this video if you're getting some value from all of this. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. And I will see you next in chapter 21.
I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like